So about a month and a half ago, I got really sick. I experienced a severe case of malaria, typhoid, and dengue fever simultaneously. By the time I received medical help for those diseases and illnesses, the doctor said I was within hours of really teetering that line of kind of going to a point that was likely, unrecoverable. So, since that point, recovery has been slow. This has been unlike anything I've ever experienced before, where typically when I'm ill, I'm able to bounce back within a couple days. That's not been the case here. However, the slow recovery that I have been experiencing has not felt unproductive because my mind has been so active with considering and evaluating a lot of the lessons learned and some of the benefits that I've received from this experience. And so in this video, I want to share with you some of those lessons that I've been learning. I've had a lot of time since the early parts of my recovery to evaluate some of the steps that we had taken before to prevent myself from even being in a situation where I had malaria in the first place, or even, what were the first couple steps after I started feeling bad. And to be honest, there's not a whole lot that I would have done differently. And perhaps, my instinct is to say, what did I do wrong? What are preventative measures I should have taken that I didn't? What are things that we, made mistakes on even after I started feeling ill, things that we should have done that I didn't do? But the truth is, looking back and evaluating ourselves, I think there are some things that we will do a little bit differently in the future, and if we were to experience something similar, we'll adjust our approach a little bit. But for the most part, I kind of feel like this is a bit of a freak anomaly, a medical anomaly. Like, how often do you hear about someone contracting both malaria, dengue, and typhoid simultaneously? Like, it doesn't happen, which is obviously what escalated my condition so quickly. I started feeling bad on really Monday, and by Friday, I was, to that to that point of no return, and so that's just really quick. Also, like, my response once I started feeling bad, I immediately went to get tested for malaria and for typhoid, and those tests came back negative. I got tested multiple times for those things here in Bow, and every time I got tested, it came back negative. And so those were false readings, false negatives, unfortunately. And so I think the truth is that sometimes bad things just happen, and sometimes dangers befall us and peril finds us, no matter how much we wish to avoid them and no matter the preventative measures that we've taken to avoid those things. And this has been a really good reminder for me that it's not just up to me whether or not I encounter or avoid danger or harm or risk. All right, all the preventative measures that I've taken that I think are fairly extensive is an expression that I don't want to experience malaria and typhoid and all these other illnesses that I had. But it's not just up to me. I'm not the only one determining my fate and my reality. The truth is, the Lord has more control over those things even than I do. Now, that's not a license to be reckless. And in fact, I think it's good for us to evaluate ourselves after we experience some sort of trauma to say, maybe there's some things I should have done, or maybe I experienced this because I was reckless in my behavior, my actions. But after I look at this in my experience, I say, you know what? I got these illnesses not because I was reckless, but perhaps I got them because that's exactly what God wanted to happen. And to think that if I put enough preventative measures in place and I try to take all these necessary right steps, and to think that that is enough to be able to take me away from any danger or risk of harm or injury or illness is a very humanistic and really practically atheistic perspective to have. I am not the number one determining factor in whether or not I experience harm in this life. The Lord has control over those things. And I'm not sure I even want to have the power to avoid harm or to avoid injury if the Lord sees that there could be some benefit behind that. I'm reminded of the parable that Jesus gives in Matthew 7 of the wise and the foolish builders. And, the wise builder, he built his life upon the rock and upon the words of Jesus in this parable. And the foolish builder, he heard the words of Jesus, but he didn't really build his life on them. He didn't act upon them. But the difference between both the wise builder and the foolish builder in this parable in Matthew 7 was not that the wise builder never experienced hardship or risk or difficulty. The parable goes that both the wise and the foolish builder, both their houses experienced the floods and the storm and the rain and the torrents that brought down the house of the foolish builder. Both of them experienced difficulty. The difference was that when one experienced difficulty, it was able to withstand. So what I think that means is that sometimes God intends for his people to go through hardship, to discipline them, to make them more holy. And that is exactly what I support God doing. I need to grow. And if God sees some benefit in my life or in the life of other people that could come from me experiencing hardship, then I don't want to prevent him from doing it. And I wouldn't want that power to prevent him from doing it. And though sometimes bad things just happen. And it's good to evaluate ourselves and say, is this a result of my own recklessness? But maybe the more spiritually fruitful question is, what spiritual lessons can I learn from this difficulty? And so that's what I've been busy considering and contemplating over these past several weeks especially. I had a lot of emotional ups and downs through this experience. And during the worst of the illness, before it was being treated, I'm not naturally a very dramatic person. I'm typically someone who says, all right, this is not a big deal, and kind of acts accordingly. But I think the first time that I thought I could die from this was on Wednesday. And then obviously those insecurities and those thoughts continued on and progressed and became more constant until probably about Saturday or Sunday. And so that's a lot of time to think morbidly about the realistic and then, as the days went on, probable reality, at least in my mind, that I'm going to die. And I wish I could share with you that was 100% a comfort, that I was eager for heaven, even though there were certainly times where that was the case. But there were also moments when I was contemplating my own death, where I became really kind of insecure, and I became very disheartened and even discouraged. And so one of those insecurities was that really after only 5 months I'm going to die here, and there was a disappointment and a frustration that perhaps only being here 5 months would kind of felt like a disappointment, like I hadn't accomplished enough, and that I hadn't been able to do what I was really set out to do here. And perhaps after a year or two, maybe, I would feel more content, with giving my life for this mission and for this cause and for, and I've been able to contemplate that insecurity in my own heart, and just realizing that I think that insecurity came from a desire and a eagerness for the grandiose and for, epic achievement that really maybe stemmed up in pride, The reality is that any service, if it is done for the Lord, is a worthy service where because the Lord calls me home while doing that act of service, that is a perfectly reasonable and honorable exchange, you know. And it's really been comforting to me thinking about one of my maybe constant meditations has been upon the character of Epaphroditus in the book of Philippians, where Paul was in house arrest, and so the Philippian church sends some, like a care package and some supplies over to Paul, and so they used one of their own, Epaphroditus, to deliver this package. But upon arriving and delivering this package to Paul, he gets deathly sick, to the point of near death, as Paul describes it. And, you know, we're not really told what Epaphroditus thought or felt, but I think it's very possible that maybe there was some insecurity within him, or at least maybe if I was in his position, I would have been filled with insecurity. You know, and saying, wow, you know, I have brothers and sisters that are dying from the sword of persecution and being martyred for their confession of Jesus being Lord. And here I'm dying, kind of being a glorified mailman delivering this package to Paul. And just like, that would have seemed like a kind of disappointing way to go. But yet, you know, in Philippians 2, Paul made sure to say, you know, no. He came close to complete what was lacking in your service, you know, and he even said, you know, hold men like him in high regard. To Paul, the idea of dying simply to deliver a care package for a needy brother or sister, that wasn't a disappointing or, you know, frustrating way to go. In fact, you know, that was an encouragement, and that should be an encouragement to plenty. And so that gives me some perspective there, and so I'm thankful that I've been able to kind of think through this. You know, I'm also reminded of the mighty men of David, that, you know, risked their lives and risked, you know, death in order to bring their King David a cup of cool water from, you know, David's hometown. And just that sort of attitude, that if I meet death, even while doing something that I don't feel like is as epic or grandiose as what I had maybe imagined in my mind, it's still a worthy thing to do. And so that's been something that I'm thankful that my mentality's been able to evolve some in the aftermath of all this. The other insecurity that I don't think I anticipated me having is this idea that, all right, Dan, you might very well die at a young age. And that means you're going to meet the Lord not having as much time to kind of smooth off your rough edges and to mature in your faith and to develop in your devotion as much as you thought you had. And this point, you know, in particular is not necessarily addressing, you know, secret sin, but just the fact that, you know, if I think I'm going to die at 70, then I imagine at 70, and I hope that I would be more mature than what I am at 29. And realizing that I might not make it to 70 was an insecure thing. Like, I'm not going to meet the Lord as groomed as I wanted to be and as I kind of anticipated being. And this thought just, you know, once I had it, just made me kind of rethink both my theology, but also my appreciation of God's grace. And just help me realize that I need to appreciate the grace of the Lord. That ultimately, if I am devoted to Him, and even if I don't get as much time as I had previously, you know, thought I was going to have to prepare myself and my character in all these ways, that if I'm still seeking Him and relying upon His grace and just trusting in Him, that God's grace will see me through in spite of that. Another thing that I've been thinking about a lot is just how utterly unimpressive I felt during this hardship. And that's probably been one of the hardest things, is that I wish I could tell you that during the low points of this experience, and when I was feeling so bad and when I was so sick, Part of me wishes that I could share with you these poetic prayers of faith and vigor and zeal and, but I can't. I guess I could tell you that my most constant and frequent prayer was no longer and no more poetic than God deliver me, God deliver me, God deliver me. And in that moment, that's all I could form, in some of those, low points. And I wish I could say that I, through it all, didn't experience any doubts or experience frustrations or confusions regarding why is God allowing this to happen, and why would God put me in a position like this? Why is God, oh, this is going to be so hard for Sonia. Oh, this is so hard for Sonia. Oh, this is going to, anyway, I wish I could tell you that, I experienced this difficulty in the way that maybe in my mind I would imagine that I would, with this rock hard faith that is impenetrable, but that's not the case. I experienced those doubts. I experienced those frustrations and confusions, and I hope that if I were to experience something similar to this in the future, that I would do better, and that this experience certainly did reveal some weaknesses in my heart that I intend to be able to remedy and to improve upon. But I would say that looking back upon just how unimpressive I felt during some of these challenges, that there's a tendency for me to look at myself and say, Dan, you're a big fat failure. Here you preach on this idea of endurance and you encourage other people to, find strength in the Lord, and then you experience this and you weren't maybe the example that you were hoping to be. And that's certainly the case, and certainly true that I feel that. But I thank God that He has not left me in that discouragement. Certainly, I know I am going to improve, and I am going to remedy some of these things. But I'm so thankful for some of the champions of faith I find in the Bible that experienced intense hardship and affliction and tribulation. And they didn't always do the right thing during that and during the valleys of those challenges. I'm thinking about people like Job, that was put under this test of faith. Would he give up? Would he curse God? And he didn't. But he made mistakes, and he certainly grew from that experience, but he was still considered a champion, not because he did everything perfectly during the hardship, but because he didn't give up. And he didn't lose his faith. He didn't curse God, but he never turned away from God. And similarly, I'm thinking characters like David and Moses and Elijah. These characters that are faithful men that were counted as being examples for us, that didn't always do the right thing and say the right thing during the affliction, but they never gave up, and that was where they found victory. Even characters like John the Baptist, that, he's in prison, and maybe things aren't going the way he thought they were. And this man who saw, the Spirit of God like a dove descend upon Jesus, and heard the voice from heaven confirming Jesus as being the Son of God, that when he was experiencing affliction, he encountered doubt to the point where he sent messengers to Jesus to say, are you really the one, or should we keep looking for someone else? Are you really the Messiah? And that's what affliction can do. And that's what affliction did for me to some degree, where it made me doubt things and question things that I wouldn't have in a normal circumstance. But yet right after John expressed those concerns to Jesus via his messengers, Jesus answered him with patience and with empathy. And then after the messengers left, he turned to the crowds he was talking to and said, wow, John's the real deal, and he commended John as being an example. And so just because affliction caused a man of faith to question things, that didn't mean that Jesus counted John as being a failure. And that's been an encouragement to me. That yes, there are things in this experience and things through this trial that make me feel bad and make me want to really develop my faith more so that I would stand more firm in the future if I were to encounter similar things. But knowing that I still kept my faith. I never turned my back upon the Lord, and He was still the person I cried out to, makes me have confidence that God never viewed me as a failure even in some of those weak moments. And that gives me courage and confidence in the aftermath of some of this. And maybe the last thing I'll share, and these are not all the lessons that I've learned, but these are just some that are standing out very prominent to me. One thing is that I didn't experience a whole lot of comfort during this this period, but one piece of comfort that I feel like really was able to steady me was Paul's words in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And that's this idea that God allows us to go through affliction, and then He comforts us in our affliction so that we would then be equipped to comfort other people as they experience affliction. And so in other words, affliction and hardship and trials are God's boot camp and training ground for equipping us to help other people. And that thought was very powerful to me throughout this experience. Now, we'll share, I wasn't sure who God was equipping. For a while, I was feeling like, and perhaps confident, that God was equipping my wife to experience the loss of a husband at a very young age and have to work through the emotional and spiritual challenges of raising kids by herself and not having me there to help. And so, but that was still a comfort in a degree, because I knew that there weren't too many people out there that I know, at least in the social circles that I'm connected with, that aren't too many people that have lost a husband to circumstances like what I was going through, and that moved to the mission field to teach the gospel, and because of that choice, died because of illness and because of that sacrifice. And perhaps that's something that the kingdom of God and God's wisdom wanted someone equipped to be able to encourage and bless and comfort someone else who is either contemplating that decision or experienced a similar loss. So I thought, wow, that's going to be really valuable. God's going to be able to use that. So for a while, I was thinking, all right, this is going to be a equipping experience for my wife and for my kids. But thankfully, I was able to recover and get treated, and now I'm so thankful that maybe that is not the area of affliction that we're equipped to be able to speak to directly, but there's a brand new area that we're able to be equipped and be thoroughly guided on how to comfort and how to guide and how to be an encouragement to someone. And so just knowing that this experience was a training ground for us, and that God was going to, put a brand new, tool in our tool pouch to be able for us to use to bless His kingdom, was something that that gave me strength and helped steady my heart during a few low points. That's all I'll share for now. Thanks again for watching a longer video. This is something that I will be continuing to contemplate and to evaluate for a long time. And so this isn't by any means the conclusion of my meditations on these things. But I thank God for what I experienced, and I thank God for all the support that I received. And I thank God for the lessons that I'm learning through all of this.